Well, buen camino there, pilgrims. I am Jeremiah Gibbs. I'm your Camino guide. Today, I'm going to be talking about what I expect to happen for Camino. Here are my top 3 predictions for Camino in 2023. I'm going to guess that the third one is not going to be a very popular one. If we look back on 2022, this was without a doubt the biggest year in the history of the Camino. Of course, it was the extended Holy Year, holding over from that year when we lost the 2021 year, when the Holy Year lost a lot of the traffic that was expected because of COVID. The extension of the Holy Year into 2022 brought on nearly 450,000 pilgrims, just a little less than 450,000. Incredible number of people making the way. And previous to the pandemic, the highest was about 349, I think. So we're talking about a pretty significant increase for that Holy Year activity, especially coming off of COVID. So Camino is just continuing to grow and to flourish as far as participation and everything, which looks really incredible. I was on Camino from Astorga to Santiago in May of 2022. You can check out the videos on this channel for my students from University of Indianapolis who traveled incredible way. But when I was on the pilgrimage in 2022, one of the things that I noticed was that the marks of COVID, that is people wearing masks, being hesitant to talk to one another, trying to distance from one another, the lower traffic, all of that. For the most part, all of that was gone last year. There was no sort of COVID concern other than just some really kind of minor precautions. The exception being they did want you wearing masks in the cathedral, I believe, and also on public transportation. So a little bit of masking, but more or less, not a lot of concern for COVID anymore. Really, the Camino has returned back to the way it was prior to COVID. So what's in store then for 2023? Well, the first thing that I'm going to say is I am fairly certain that this year is going to be another huge year for Camino. Not quite as large as last year's Holy Year traffic, but this is going to be a big year. And I'm basing that on a few different things. First of all, historically, we have always seen a bump after the Holy Year. There is a bump from the previous year's sort of participation level. So the last normal year that we had was 2019. There are almost 350,000 pilgrims. I would expect just from the normal course of things that would come up from 350,000. I think because of how COVID worked out, because of how huge the year was last year with pilgrims, I'm going to make my prediction that I think you'll see 400,000 pilgrims make the Camino this year. That's a bit of a stretch, but I think it's highly possible that it will eclipse 400,000 again. I'm basing that on a few things. First of all, January was actually larger this year than it was in 2022. January pilgrimage was significantly higher, and I think the article that I read about that was largely about international pilgrims. So I think that there's going to be a fairly large wave of international pilgrims that either were unsure about COVID, what kind of COVID regulations there might be, or just wanted to stay away from the crowds of the Holy Year. And so that I think there's going to be a fairly large number of international pilgrims that have held off until this year. So you're going to see a lot of those folks make their way out. But the other thing that I would say is that I've talked with some of the other Camino collaborators. I also saw Ivar's comments about his service that he provides for baggage, and I think everyone is saying that the amount of traffic and interest that we're getting on our websites or on our YouTube channel traffic and things like that, there's a good indication that this year is going to be a really big year for Camino de Santiago. There's a lot of activity, a lot of interest, a lot of people planning pilgrimages. You can even see it in the Facebook forums as they continue to grow very, very quickly. So I think it's going to be a big year. I'm guessing maybe as much as 400,000 pilgrims. The second prediction that I have for you is I think that this year the number of albergues is going to increase significantly. There was a drop off a little bit in the year of COVID, of course, and really in 2021 a lot of those places were still shut down. Last year I noticed that almost all of those were open back up. There were a few new ones here and there that had started up, but I think that the fact that Camino recovered so strongly last year, I think this year you're going to see a number of new albergues. I think there's going to be a new albergues popping up all over as the possibility of sustained long-term traffic to the Camino. You know, at the end of the day, the law of supply and demand with economics works. I think you're going to see a lot of people say, look, there are more new albergues. The prices have gone up slightly, about 10 or 15% over COVID, which is an indication that there's plenty of traffic, there's plenty of people out there wanting to make the way. I think you're going to see a lot of new albergues popping up in the next year or two as the supply increases to meet the demand. And that number 2 point really is going to connect to this third point, which is I think you're going to see a significant amount of commercialization to the Camino. For some of you, that's a really bad thing. You're really disappointed about that. But look, I think that the supply of pilgrims is going to be met, or sorry, the demand of pilgrims is going to be met with supply of providers. And I think you're going to see more and more people providing sales of goods, people making goods, more albergues, more restaurants, more people providing sort of additional services such as, you know, we have pack services and all those kind of things already. I think you're going to see more of those kind of concierge type services, and more I think you're going to see a commercialization of the Camino. For some of you, that's a really bad thing. For others of you, you welcome it. Certainly, I can tell you that the Spanish economy is welcoming the economic opportunity that's being provided. So for whatever it's worth, I think you're going to see a significant increase in the level of commercialization both in 2023 and in 2024. With that in mind, I suppose you may say this is a kind of commercialization too. You may check out my website if you'd like some help planning your Camino, CaminoGuide.info. I have what I call my Camino Launch Service, which allows you to get some help with the first few days of planning. And if that way, if you don't want to hire into one of these companies that does all the planning for you, we can help you make the first few days of planning and then give you some guidance to be able to plan the rest of the way out. I consider that a nice middle of the road for those who want a little extra help, but don't want to have their entire route nailed down by a company. So check out CaminoGuide.info. Links are in the description for the Camino Launch Service. If you want to see what my Camino looked like in 2022, click this link to see my video with students as I walked Camino in 2022.